This city needs zero introduction, but a lot of tourists visit for all of the same things. And if you've watched this channel before, you'll know that I like to go a little deeper. Recently, I've been filming a series of videos with my mum where we go to London spots that most tourists miss. Now, my mum is a blue badge tour guide, so she has helped me out a lot with this series. Today, I'm hoping to replicate the same thing in Amsterdam, but I am not an Amsterdam expert. I do not have an Amsterdam tour guide with me. So this walking road is the product of a lot of research. In my research, I've been trying to find Amsterdam hidden gems and secret spots that most tourists don't go to. And it's not been that difficult. I have been to Amsterdam twice before as an adult, and I think as a child as well. My adult trips have not been the most cultured. However, that all changes today as I find interesting street corners and little hidden gems that showcase Amsterdam's history and culture. So let's see what I find. And if you know Amsterdam a little bit better than me, please feel free to let me know more secret spots in the comments and any more context that you can provide. I've done a lot of research, but I am not an Amsterdam expert. First place that I pinned on my Google Maps is right here. This is Amsterdam's oldest and widest bridge. And my research told me that it hides an entire piece of the city's medieval past. So most people cross this bridge without realising that under their feet are vaulted chambers that once housed prisoners. It's called Toornsluis, and I do apologise for my bad Dutch pronunciation throughout this video. Toornsluis literally means tower lock, and this bridge used to support a tall defensive tower called the Jan Rudenpoorttoren, and this was part of Amsterdam's medieval wall system. It stood here until 1829 when the city demolished it to make way for new traffic routes. But the foundations are the huge stone arches that are now part of the bridge. Let's go and have a little look from down here as well. It was built in 1648, which was the year the Dutch Republic gained independence from Spain. The width of the bridge, which is over 42 metres, was extraordinary for the time. Look, it's all the way over there. And it allowed wagons, horses and goods to pass in both directions, which was quite unusual for Europe at the time. It's made from Bentheimer sandstone, which is imported from quarries in Germany. And this is a material that appears all over 17th century Amsterdam. You can kind of see some of the foundations here, or at least what I think were the foundations. So after the tower came down, the spaces beneath were used as holding cells for petty criminals and drunks. Now, I think the next spot that I wanted to visit is on the bridge itself. So this is the statue of Multatuli on the Single. And if you've ever brought fair trade coffee, you've already met the legacy of this man, Edward Douwes Dekker, better known as Multatuli. This statue faces the Single Canal, which was once lined with the offices of Dutch trading companies that controlled the country's global empire. This positioning is deliberate. Multatuli spent his life exposing the darker side of that wealth. So Multatuli was a 19th century Dutch civil servant in the Dutch East Indies, which is nowadays Indonesia. He worked in colonial administration until he saw the extent of exploitation and corruption. And in 1860, he wrote the novel Max Havelaar, and he used fiction to attack the government's treatment of Javanese farmers. He revealed that the Dutch colonial system was forcing Indonesian communities to grow products for export rather than food. This meant that communities in Indonesia, or the Dutch East Indies as it was then known, got poorer and poorer while the Netherlands got richer and richer. Max Havelaar was one of the first texts that really addressed this topic, and people found it really shocking for its honesty. But there was satire, humour and outrage, but it had a really clear message that colonial profits were built on human suffering. And obviously this is something that we saw throughout European empires, including the British Empire, the French Empire and the Spanish Empire. So today he stands watching over them, and the Max Havelaar Foundation promotes fair trade products, takes its name from his novel, and Multatuli means I have suffered much in Latin, and this was his chosen pen name. And this book was one of the first examples of early literature to directly challenge empire from the inside. So it was really, really important, and I'm glad that there's a statue of him to commemorate this now. We're going to head down here to get to our next destination. Now, like I said, this is going to be very different to the videos that I make with my mum. Obviously, she is an expert. She is telling us her London stories off the top of her head. I will put one of our videos up here if you want to check it out, and I'll link it at the end of the video as well. But I always think it's nice to share stuff that I've researched as well. I'm really, really interested in history, and yeah, just like learning about things and talking about them. So we're on one of Amsterdam's busiest shopping streets now. It's called Kalverstraat, and you can see here it's got Flying Tiger up there. I had a Bershka. I think there's even a Holland and Barrett, Uniqlo. So it's very, very busy. But what I wanted to look at was this Gothic doorway. This is squeezed between Vodafone and Waterdrop. And it's called De Papagaai, which means the parrot. If you walk through this doorway, you'll end up stepping into a church. And this is a church that existed in secret for almost 2 centuries. It says there's free entrance, so let's go and have a look. During the Dutch Reformation from the 1570s onwards, Catholic worship was outlawed in the Dutch Republic. Amsterdam officially became Protestant, but Catholics still made up nearly half of the population. So instead of abandoning their faith, they created hidden churches. And these were sanctuaries disguised as private houses, warehouses, or lofts. De Papagaai began as one of those. It had a plain street front which hid a richly decorated interior where people would gather for mass. But when Catholic emancipation came in the 19th century, De Papagaai was rebuilt as a full Gothic church. It opened in 1848, which was the same year that there were liberal revolutions all over Europe. And it's not sure where the name De Papagaai or the parrot comes from. It might have been an older house sign which had a parrot on it, or it may have been because parrots are a traditional symbol of speech and truth. Now, hidden churches like this exist all over the Netherlands, but De Papagaai became one of the first open Catholic churches in central Amsterdam after legislation. So it's a really important one to see. Its length stretches back over 2 townhouses, and it is very much still an active Catholic church today. And then literally, if you just step out here, you'll be back out into the hubbub of the shopping street. So this elaborate exterior will have dated to the 19th century. It would have been a much more simpler exterior when Catholic churches were not allowed. Now, the next Google pin I saved was just up the road. So this is still on the main street. Got Adidas, JD Sports down there. This is kind of another hidden doorway. Now, it is just called Amsterdam Gallery on Google Maps. It's part of the Amsterdam Museum complex, but this is the Civic Guards Gallery, and it's home to 4 centuries of portraits. So in the 1600s, before there was a proper Dutch army, Amsterdam defended itself with civil militias made up of merchants and guildmasters. Each company commissioned group portraits to hang in their halls. These are giant canvases of armed men posing proudly with halberds and banners. And the most famous of it all is Remembrance Night Watch. Now, it says that this location is temporarily closed due to renovation, but today they have newer portraits in the same space. And these are firefighters, police officers, paramedics and volunteers. Modern heroes who stand beside their 17th century predecessors. So I guess it's showing how Amsterdam still protects and defends itself. Apparently on the inside there's also a brightly painted ship's figurehead which sits under the glass roof, which is a reminder that the militias also defended the port and trade routes. Now, it opened in 2004 as a public passageway between Kalverstraat and Begijnhof, and the oldest paintings here date from the 1580s, the newest from the 21st century. Now, the next spot is another couple of minutes walk down the road, and this is one I'm not looking forward to pronouncing. As a little bit of context, I have dyspraxia and I do struggle with my pronunciation, even in words in English, and especially of words in other languages. I love languages. I speak Spanish. I try and learn little bits of languages wherever I go, but pronunciation I really struggle with. So this is another little turning off Kalverstraat. And we're going to walk down this road. We're going to go to a place called Begijnhof. I think that is how it's pronounced. Now, you could walk down Kalverstraat 100 times and never notice this doorway. It looks like the entrance to a private courtyard, but I think it is one of the oldest surviving sanctuaries in Amsterdam. This is such a little oasis. Now, this is a hidden medieval courtyard which was founded in the 14th century, and it was home to a community of Belgians. Pageants were laywomen who lived semi-religious lives. They took no vows and they could own property. They were free to leave at any time. And that was quite radical independence at the time. Now these narrow gabled houses, they mostly date from the 17th and 18th centuries, although the site itself is centuries older. Now life here largely revolved around prayer, charity work and teaching. But during the Reformation in the 1500s, Catholic teaching was banned and the Begijnhof chapel was confiscated and handed over to the English-speaking Protestants. And this is why the English Reformed Church is on the site to this day. The women actually continued their Catholic life alongside it. There were two faiths in one courtyard, and it's a good example of living religious tolerance. Nowadays it is a residential courtyard, which is why you're asked to stay quiet and you can only enter at certain times. I'm also on the hunt for the Trippenhuis. One of the houses here is made of dark oak timber and it dates back to around 1528. Let's go and see if we can find it. Here we go, here is the Trippenhuis. And this is one of the oldest wooden structures in all of Amsterdam. Like many European cities at the time, after lots of fires, the government banned building in timber, which makes this building a very rare survivor. But yeah, this dates back to 1528. And here we've got the Anglican church that is still used today. But there has been a religious foundation here since 1346. And Belgians were often very well educated. They often taught reading and sewing to children. And the really interesting thing about Belgian people is the last one died in 1971. So this was a tradition that spun centuries. It's not ancient history at all. There's a lot of road work, canal work going on up there, so I have to go the long way around. But we've made it to the next destination. So this is a cut through between canals, but it's actually so much more. It's a narrow vaulted corridor called Oud-West. I think it is nowadays part of Amsterdam University. I did see a university sign just up there. So the name literally means Old Man's Gate, and in the 1600s it was part of a charitable almshouse. The University of Amsterdam took over the area in the 19th century and it became a passage between lecture halls. So professors, students and booksellers all moved in. And by the late 1800s, traders began setting up second-hand bookstalls underneath the arches, and this catered to students who couldn't afford new books. And these tables are still here today. I can see some of the bookstalls right in front of me. So it's part flea market and part open-air library, and this is all the University Quarter. And here we've got the university buildings. I believe this is Amsterdam's law complex. And apparently a famous customer used to be none other than Vincent van Gogh. I couldn't see it for ages, but here it is. There was also some work going on underneath it, so you have to bear with me on that. But this is a canal lined with some of Amsterdam's grandest houses, and as you can quite clearly see, there is one facade that outshines them all. And this is the Trippenhuis. It was built in the 1660s for the wealthy Tripp brothers, who gained their fortunes manufacturing cannons and weapons for the Dutch Navy. So the Tripp family supplied artillery to armies across Europe at the height of the Dutch Republic. What's quite interesting about them is that their money came from conflict, but they spent it on culture. They liked art, architecture, and even philanthropy. And this house is their statement piece. It's a double mansion stretching across 2 plots, and the facade is carved entirely from stone. Let's walk over to the other side of the canal and have a look at it. Every window and every column was designed to impress. There's shields, helmets, and cannon barrels sculpted into the stonework. And inside, the 2 brothers each had their own residence, which was connected by a grand central hall. And legend has it that Rembrandt himself painted a family portrait that once hung inside. Now, I'm right by it now, but because of these roadworks, I can't really get much of a vista of it without getting in people's way. Can I stand here? Let's stand here for a moment and we'll look up at it. In 1812, Napoleon's occupation of the Netherlands turned Amsterdam into a French-controlled city. And after its fall, the Trippenhuis was repurposed. It became the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences, which is a title it still holds today. It also housed the first collection of the Rijksmuseum before it moved to where it lives today. So it's been a weapons manufacturer's palace, a French government office, a science academy and an art museum. Now we've made it to Nieuwmarkt, which is one of Amsterdam's oldest public squares. And you can see in the centre there's a turreted brick building. It looks straight out of a fairy tale. This is De Waag, the old city way house, and one of the most important survivors from medieval Amsterdam. De Waag began life in 1488 as the St. Anthony's Gate, which was part of the city's outer defensive walls. When the fortifications were torn down in the 17th century, the gate stayed, and the city turned it into a weigh house. So 17th century weigh houses were where goods were weighed to work out the taxes and verify the trading honesty. Now, Amsterdam was a port city and weight of goods was very important. Cargoes of spices, cloth, cheese and tobacco were all carried here, checked on official scales and then sealed for sale. And the merchants would pay a small fee for each weighing, but weighed goods meant they could get much better prices. Now, as you can see these days, De Waag is a restaurant and cafe. As the 1600s progressed, it became the meeting place for various professional guilds, including masons, artists and surgeons. The top floor housed the Surgeons' Guild Hall, where anatomy lessons and dissections were held. And I'm going to talk about Rembrandt again. In 1632, he painted the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicolas Tulp. So this building became somewhere where science and art met under one roof. Now, in the 1800s, the guilds were abolished and this building began to decay. It served briefly as a fire station and later it narrowly escaped demolition. But in the 20th century, city people fought to preserve it, and that is why nowadays it is a cafe and also a small museum. Here's our next stop, Folgwangshan Hihua Temple. So this was the first purpose-built Chinese Buddhist temple in Europe, and it's right in the old sailors' quarter. So for centuries, this neighbourhood, the civic, was the entry point to the city. So sailors, dock workers and traders from all across Asia came through here. And by the late 20th century, Amsterdam had a thriving Chinese community centred around Nieuwmarkt. In 2000, the Folgwangshan Buddhist order from Taiwan built this temple as a cultural and spiritual centre. It looks very similar to a lot of temples that I've seen in China, the Chinese imperial style with carved dragons, sweeping roofs, red and gold woodwork. Yellow was once reserved for emperors in China, so it is used here to symbol enlightenment. It is very much a slice of Asia in Amsterdam. My next stop is Interapgen Tavern. This is right where the civic meets the Nieuwmarkt, and it's a squat wooden building that seems older than everything around it. It's one of the city's oldest surviving houses, and according to legend, it's a place where sailors once paid their bar bills with monkeys. The name translates to "at the little monkeys," and the building dates from the 15th century and is one of only two remaining timber-framed houses in Amsterdam. So in the days when ships returned from the Dutch East Indies, this was a favourite stop for sailors coming ashore after months at sea. They brought back exotic goods, spices and occasionally live animals. Monkeys were very valuable curiosities, and the story goes that some sailors were short of cash after months at sea, so they left monkeys behind as a payment. Apparently the place was eventually filled with monkeys, and the owner warned future guests, "Don't stay here, you'll get lice from the apes." We don't know if this story is true, but the name has stuck. Next up, we have the Schreeuwstoren. This round brick tower on the edge of the old harbour is one of Amsterdam's last surviving fragments of the city wall. It is called the Schreeuwstoren, and it was built in 1487. It once guarded the entrance to the IJ Bay when the city was half of its size. So in the 1400s, Amsterdam was still a port town surrounded by stone park ramparts. The Schreeuwstoren was part of that system, one of about 26 towers linked by canals and moats. When the walls came down in the 17th century to make space for expansion, the tower stayed. It was too solid and too useful to be destroyed, and it became the watchtower for arriving ships. Now the name is said to mean Weeper's Tower. Locals claimed that women once stood here crying as their husbands left sail for the Indies. However, in reality, the name probably comes from the word schrei, which is an old Dutch word to describe a sharp or angular shape. But the legend has stuck, and apparently there is a plaque outside which shows a woman in tears. Trying to find it now. Can't find the plaque. Let me know in the comments if you know where it is. That is pretty much all we've got time for. You might be able to see it is starting to get dark. It's Amsterdam in November, so we don't have all that much light, but I hope you've enjoyed walking around the city with me today. Like I said, it's not somewhere I know hugely well, but I've really enjoyed learning these new stories and I'd love to hear more. So let me know in the comments what I've missed. Who knows? Maybe I'll be able to do a part 2 at some point. I'm actually getting an Uber back to my hotel, so I'm just waiting for that now. And then I need to grab my stuff and head back to Amsterdam Central Station, which is only up there, but my bags are at my hotel. And then I will be taking the night train to Vienna tonight. And I'm taking it in a very interesting way. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited to share. And I hope I'll see you next time. Sticking around, I recommend checking out this video about some of the hidden spots in London that most tourists miss. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time. Bye!